Hello adventurers, welcome back to the tavern. Today we will be going further to understand some of the basics to running your first one-shot or short-form campaign. Story hooks are a short, few-sentence jumping-off point that can be a great starting place for any campaign. I'll give an example from a popular D&D sourcebook, The Curse of Strahd. This is from the 5th edition version of the module, but it was originally written by Tracy and Laura Hickman way back in 1st edition, but has since been expanded for 5th. So light spoilers for anyone playing in or just starting a Curse of Strahd game and wants to remain unspoiled for any plot points. Adventurers from a foreign land find themselves in Barovia, a mysterious realm surrounded by deadly fog and ruled by Strahd von Zarovich, a vampire and wizard. Using a deck of Taroka cards to predict their future, a fortune teller named Madame Eva sets them on a dark course that takes them to many corners of Barovia, culminating with a vampire hunt in Castle Ravenloft. It is clear, concise, and articulates the main goals of the plot. While this type of plot hook doesn't need to be dictated to your players verbatim, it gives us as the GM a great jumping off point to build at least one aspect of our story around. In the case of Curse of Strahd, the entire campaign and module is represented in just these 2 sentences. But maybe we only need a plot hook for a one-shot, or the first arc of a long-form campaign. A story hook is simply a place or concept for the beginning stages of developing your plot, and of course can be molded to suit a growing story. Nothing here is written in stone, and if your plot, which originally involved a political intrigue, devolves into a zombie horror, then your hook is now different, and maybe could be updated. However, it's not always necessary. Let's develop some plot hooks together to show that these can suit any real written narrative, but works exceptionally well for TTRPGs in general. In an ideal scenario, you would make many of these, as well as one overarching plot for any long-form campaign that's divided up into story arcs. Any one of these story arcs you can think of as chapters in a book, or books in a series, or even episodes in a TV show. Each one needs its own plot, and for that plot you can have a hook. However, the entire series also needs its own plot and hook. Let's start there, as I think it's the most applicable to a fresh GM, and can be used for both one-shots and short-form campaigns as well. Let's say I've reached out to my group, and they seem interested in a classic swords and sorcery style campaign, with some political intrigue thrown in. We know that most of them like to favor combat, but many are open to roleplay if it's in the context of achieving their goals or improving their hometown. Let's extract what we think the party's motives are from this very brief description. Keeping in mind, you should try to get more information than this if you can. Our plot needs to be able to devolve into combat easily, given that seems to be a focus of the group. So our villain should be something real and tangible, not a force or abstract type of evil. We also know that our characters are interested in the politics of our small town, but mainly due to their attachment to it and their altruism to the people in it. This could be family members, friends, colleagues, and more. The last thing that we know is that swords and sorcery campaigns tend to feature a villain who's willing to use magic against the people of the world. With all those bits of information picked out, let's experiment with some early plot hooks. The town of Coldport has been ruled for 5 years by a tyrant known as the Master and his mercenary company, the Black Hand, since their hostile takeover from the previous Democratic Council. The townsfolk have had enough, and feel the Master needs to be overthrown, but are afraid to act in the event he sets his guard on the population. I know it's a bit of a jump to get a finished hook without knowing where to go, but let's talk about my thinking. I decided that the town I was going to come up with should have some inherent value. Thus, I decided to make it a port town, likely immersed in some resource trade. I chose this because I knew I wanted the town to have gone through some kind of political upheaval, changing the fabric of the community for the worse. In this case, a hostile mercenary group seeking power. This checks some of the boxes that my players had right away. The politics of their town being important, and the setting can easily spring into combat with mercenary guards walking around the town, instigating the townfolk. In my mind, the ultimate culmination of all these party desires was a revolution, sparking the people to rise up against the Master and his mercenaries, with the players leading them into combat. We can see how using the player desires and goals really helps us shape our plot hooks. And that's just with a little bit of information for a short-form campaign or one-shot. If you are looking to weave together a long-form campaign, just ask your players for more information and weave it into the story. Maybe in this case, one of the players did some work for the mercenary company and still has some ties to them, further complicating their overall struggle in the town. Or perhaps someone is directly related to the master in some close way, but they don't know it yet, and this can be some dramatic final reveal as they duel the master in the streets. We can see how story hooks give us a great starting point to draw inspiration from, but ultimately the direction should be drawn from the player characters and their backstories. Next, I'd like to highlight some resources if you are stuck on what to include in your next plot hook. One of my favorite places to find plot hooks from the community is Reddit. r/D&D plot hooks is full of lists of ideas, as well as aspiring DMs asking for help with their ideas as well. Give it a browse through sometime, or pose your question to the community and see what we all come up with together. By far, one of the best resources that I've found for compiling the many lists of various plot hooks and story points is dndcompendium.com. They have an entire section hyperlinked out to dozens of resources entitled Plot Hooks and Adventure Seeds. Notably also recommending to head over to r/D&D plot hooks as well. The thing I notice as a consistent factor in how I write plot hooks is the need for information. The more I know about setting, characters, and motivation, the more I find that plot hooks just fall into place a little bit easier. This ties back to the concept of a session zero. Not only do you get to introduce your players to the setting that they will be playing in, but the players will get to introduce their characters to that setting, and you can start making your plans. I will be making an entire video on session zeros in the future, but I figured I would highlight them as a tool here as well. Now, we've spoken a lot about how players can help you to create plot hooks, but let's talk a little about how your setting can also affect your plot. I have developed a few settings over the years of playing TTRPGs, but my most recent one now spans over multiple campaigns and timelines. The setting is classic high fantasy, with an epic pantheon, multiple ages of the world building on top of one another, cataclysmic events, and a deep history. So clearly, I'm not throwing in just any plot without taking consideration for what I've already written. Take the pantheon that I've developed as an example. I wouldn't write about the nature god acting completely out of character just to fit a plot. If I were to be writing a new story in my world, there would have to be overarching themes of mortals versus gods, fate versus freedom, and good versus evil. I may at first lean into my players' requests for a heist plot in a crowded city, but maybe eventually they steal from the wrong group of people, and they find themselves not only indebted to the cult of the god of treachery, but to that god as well. Maybe now their talents are used for stealing an artifact from the god of justice, their patron's arch nemesis. Another example would be taking a setting like Dark Sun, which is classically post-apocalypse, and writing a high magic, technology, wizards, aristocrat story within it. We need to be true to ourselves in our players, as well as whatever setting we find them in. At the end of the day, writing good plot hooks is about taking all the information that you have, picking out what is relevant, and applying it to the game. The best advice that I could give is to not write this in a bubble. If you are inspired by a TV show or movie, video game, or other campaign that you've been in or seen, then go for it. Just don't try to fit a square plot into a round setting. Listen to your players, stick to a genre and theme, and stay true to a setting, and you'll find that you're making plot hooks that your players love. I've been your Tavern Keeper, and I hope to see you in the tavern again soon. Stay safe, adventurer.